Welcome back to Jeff Willett's Muscle Hub, home of my weekly Q&A show and all of my YouTube video updates. Thank you all for your question submissions this week. Keep them coming in. You guys drive the show. Now let's get into this week's top 5. Number 1 is from John C., and this came through email. And he asked, I read for natural lifters that it's better to train every other day doing a full body routine instead of everything only one time per week. He said, I would love your input to help clear this up. Well, if you've been following any of my principles for any amount of time, you know that I really feel strongly in the drug-free bodybuilder training every body part only one time per week. And from my experience, after like 24 years now of living it every day, and the last 16 years really devoted into these principles, I really feel strongly that to maximize your muscle building potential, it's most effective to train every body part one time per week only directly with overload. Now you got to remember that even though you're not training these body parts directly with load, muscles are getting worked multiple times all week long, so you really are training things multiple times a week anyway, just only once directly with these compound basic lifts. So again, you can train a variety of different ways and get varying degrees of results depending on a multitude of factors, but for my money, the best way is every body part once per week with the Maxwell T principles. Question 2 is from Nicholas Vestergaard, and this came from Facebook. And he asked, when trying to get leaner, you recommend skimming calories over time. How does it work in a maximum muscle building phase? Well, you kind of just go the opposite direction. When you're trying to get leaner, we progressively skim calories over time, just as he mentioned. When you're working in a maximum muscle building phase, you want to gradually increase calories. And then what we do is we always want to put those calories first in the pre and post workout bubble. You want the majority of your calories and carbohydrates for the whole day coming in that post workout bubble. So that's where I would start adding calories. And ultimately, when you're building up in a maximum muscle building phase, you'd like to get about 2 grams per pound of protein total. And you want to keep the ratios of about 50% of your calories from protein, upper 30s from carbohydrates, and that will leave 10 to low teens in fat. So you're building up, keeping those ratios, gradually adding over time, maybe 150 calories to 200 at a time. And you really don't want to get to the point where you feel like you're stuffing yourself. So, you know, hunger is going to gauge that a little bit too. So it's really just the process in reverse, gradual caloric additions over time. Question 3 comes from Pavi415, and this came through YouTube. It says, when coming back from taking a week off, do you start right where you left off or do you lower the weights? He's referencing in Maxwell T training, after every 8 to 10 weeks, you want to take a complete week off for recovery. When you come back, I think it makes sense to establish new numbers. I often term that as an acclimation week. So what I'm going to do when I come back after a week off, I'm going to select weights that I can get about 6 times pretty easily with. I'm not going to try to pick up right where I left off. I want to establish new numbers. I treat each 8 or 10 week cycle as its own chapter, if you will, starting with fresh numbers and then going from there. I also use that as a time to clear out any bad habits that might have crept in. It's a good time to check your form and make sure you're doing everything, executing all the Maxwell T principles as best as you can. So I would back off a little bit with the weight and start establishing new numbers with excellent execution. Question 4 comes from Dib Merjan, and this is through Facebook. Is it normal to lose some muscle while dieting and doing cardio to get leaner? If it isn't, then how do you avoid it? Well, it can easily happen depending upon what principles you're using, and it's very important when you're trying to get leaner to stick with very smart principles because you want to keep any muscle loss at a very minimum. If you're doing a lot of things that are conducive to muscle loss, such as empty stomach cardio first thing in the morning, long duration cardio, high rep training, high volume training, yanking out all your carbohydrates. If you're doing a combination of all these things, I think you are encouraging muscle loss, and it likely will happen. If you follow the smart Maxwell T principles that we prescribe, then any muscle loss is going to be kept at a very, very minimum, even as we shift that pendulum toward maximum fat burning. So it's very important that you put all these principles together because they all work synergistically to help maximize that body composition change, and as I said, keep any muscle loss to a complete minimum. Question 5 comes from Adam Z through Twitter. He says, if you could take only one supplement, what would it be? Well, if I could choose only one supplement, this is the one I would pick. VP2 Whey Isolate by AST Sports Science. You always want to spend the majority of your supplement budget on quality protein, and Whey Isolate is the best. And as far as I'm concerned, VP2 Whey Isolate is the best one you can get. I can't prove this, but I think I've consumed more VP2 Whey Isolate than any other human on the planet. So for my money, AST Sports Science, VP2 Whey Isolate, if I could only take one supplement, this is what it would be. Well, I want to thank you all for tuning in this week. Keep submitting your questions. You can send them through Twitter, through Facebook, through YouTube. You can hashtag them AskJW. And I know I've been talking about my muscle masterclass. That is really close to being done. So stay connected to find out the release date of that. So once again, thank you all for tuning in. Now let's go out and execute.